Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Some other folks may be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, but none of them will ever love you the way I do. It's me and you, boy. And as the years go by, our friendship will never die. Something about our destiny, because you've got a friend in me.
Okay.
That's Toy Story.
Okay. I thought you had ChatGPT write you a poem.
Toy Story, you've got a friend. Well, that's actually Randy Newman, but
I'm surprised you didn't sing it to us.
In my life by Toy Story.
Yeah, don't seek out other Randy Newman songs.
Usually you sing to us at the beginning of the podcast.
He doesn't really sing that line, I feel like. Anyway.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah, not an endorsement.
Was
Randy
that directed
Newman,
towards both of us, or Eric? Or
it was to you, Jess.
Depends on which one of us are friends.
It's very timely, Alex, because that's what we're talking about today. Is
I wanted
friendship.
To get us right into there.
Yeah, you did it. You accomplished your task at hand. Today's topic is why adult friendship is dying. I think in this country we're experiencing what they call a loneliness epidemic, and I think it's probably at least right now, it seems to be more heightened or at least noticeable with men. Not to say that women are excluded from this, because I don't believe that at all. I just think that it's at least the conversation is probably rising to the surface because a lot of men are not really in traditional friendships that they maybe had been in years past. But I think across the country, most adults are, experiencing some sort of drifting away from that kind of intimacy that comes with friendship. And what's what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about that and how modern life has kind of made friendships become more surface level, less deeper, and what that looks like. And even from a Christian perspective, one of the things that the church is all about is community. And is the church doing a good job at helping create those friendships and spaces for that? And what do you guys think? Are you guys good friends? Do you have friendships?
I do, and I think as we brought up talking about this, I think you hear the word friend, and it feels very nebulous. Like, what does that mean? Like, if you're like, Alex, do you have friends? Almost everyone would be like, yeah, I have friends, but
I have Facebook, and I've got lots of them.
Yeah, you got that, and that's how it's used. But like, there's certainly levels of friendships, or different. Because I don't think there's anybody that would say they don't have friends, and yet a lot of the people that say they have friends, they're suffering from this loneliness. And so I think figuring out what does that actually mean to have friends. And one of the things I found helpful, that at least for me to frame it in my mind, I was looking at a psychologist named Mina B, and she's written a book on friendships, and she talks about like circles of friendship and how essentially everybody has the capacity in different friendships. And so at least this was helpful for me in like analyzing, do I have friends and what categories are they in? So the first circle, the tightest circle, she called intimacy of friendship. And obviously we only have so much capacity for intimacy. I mean, for most people, if they're married, hopefully their spouse would go inside of that. A lot of people, it's familial kind of relationships that you are with. The people that you can be vulnerable with and feel like you're not judged is what she would say. The second friendship, she had said, that's like colleagues, mentors who offer companionship, encouragement, sense of camaraderie really is built in that. So that kind of spreads out. And then where I thought was interesting, I hadn't considered these two, was participation relationships, which these are built basically on, we participate in the same thing. And so like, if you're in a church community group, right, you see each other at church on Sundays, you see each other there, but doesn't mean you're having intimate, vulnerable conversations all the time. Or if you're a part of a team, or you're a part of a team at work, a lot of times our relationship is framed around participation in the same thing. And the last she talked about was exchange. And so that's like, maybe you have a therapist, and that's a real relationship. Like Jess probably has a lot of exchange relationships, where you go to the hairdresser and you like, we can pick up where we left off. We can have these conversations, and they're good, healthy relationships. But at the end of the day, like, you spend time with each other, you share things, but there's a boundary, and then there's a payment at the end of the day. Like, there's clear boundaries of, hey, we have this hour together, but you're not texting your hairdresser most of the time, or Jess, you have boundaries. Like you don't get to just text me all the time. We'll talk about these things in my office. And so for me, that was at least helpful to figure out, okay, I have people in all of those categories.
Can you repeat the categories
that
again?
I would say are friends? So intimacy, colleagues and mentors, or companionship, participation, and then exchange.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I think for me, I would always kind of loosely categorize people as like acquaintances, friends, good friends, and best friends.
Yeah.
You know, that's just kind of like the way in my head it kind of like just a loose categorization. But I was like, oh yeah, I know that person, or like, oh no, that's a good friend. Like we share personal information with each other, or there's like kind of like that best friend territory where no, you're telling this person your struggles and maybe some deeper secrets and things like that. But
I would say that's probably how most of us are thinking about it. So then when somebody asks like, who's your best friend, and you don't feel like you have somebody that fits into all the best friend categories, then you start feeling like I'm isolated or I'm missing something, and then I think it leads to more of those maybe intrusive thoughts of like, okay, does nobody like me? Does nobody know who I am? Like, it's just hard. There's a lot of pressure. And I think it's been around since we were kids. Like, who's your best friend? I mean, even when I'm meeting with kids, like in my intakes, like one of my questions when I'm looking at their social circles is, who's your best friend? Like, that's one of the things I ask. And so I think it's kind of ingrained that we kind of pay attention to or we notice. And so when we feel or we notice that disconnection, then it just becomes this big, really noticeable thing in our lives.
Well, I think another thing is when you're a kid, like young kids, I remember when my kids were real little and we'd go to a park or some event and they'd meet a kid and it'd be an hour or 2 hours and then we'd leave and they'd say, oh, I made a friend today, or that person's my friend now, you know, and it was just so instantaneous. And it was just like you had school and you kind of had these automatic systems of like, okay, every day we're going to hang out at recess or in gym class, and you start to create those friendships. Or I think as we enter into adulthood, yeah, you have workplace friends that I think because of that rhythm that helps, but I think those deeper relationships, it's harder to form them. But I also think that a lot of times, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this more, but I think a lot of times technology and social media and that sort of thing has been blamed for the lack of friendship or the loneliness epidemic. But if I almost want to look at it a little differently and say maybe, yeah, that could be part of the reason, but I think why that is the efficiency that it's created, and that a lot of times, like a very efficient life leads to like accidentally cutting out friendship.
Yeah.
Because it's like we've streamlined everything and we've convinced ourselves, and I know I do this all the time, when a new technology comes around that helps me streamline something, I'm going, okay, this is working for me because now I can make more space. I can make more time for myself. But really that's probably not what I'm in my core. I'm not desiring that. I'm desiring connection. And so when I make more space for myself, a lot of times that just leads me to be like, okay, well now I'm just kind of alone in my space that I've created because I've got work and then I've got all my busy activities with my family or whatever, but then I've got, you know, my friends are online now, so they're in social media or whatever. So I've made this efficient for me. And now when it comes to that time where my soul and heart is kind of longing for connection, it's not there because I've streamlined everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's like anything, there's always multiple factors that lead into, you know, this idea of, for adults, friendships are getting more difficult. Obviously, you pointed to the pandemic. I think that was one of those big things that, especially the fact, one, I think it showed people that there was more loneliness than I think they realized. Yeah. Because those circles of participation, oftentimes, you don't realize how valuable those are, like those water cooler conversations. Or I was even talking to a guy, obviously in the infamous noon ball that I play. Yeah. But he's been injured for a couple months and he works from home, and he's like, I didn't realize like how much being here twice a week and just the relationships like helped keep me from loneliness. Yeah. And he's like, but it's weird if I'm not participating to just show up and watch you guys, you know, so that that relationship.
He could be a cheerleader.
Yeah, he could. But so even that, so I think the pandemic and then more and more people working from home, they started to realize, oh, yes, I can still get my work done, but those connections to people inside of the office or those types of things, maybe I'm more efficient, but I feel like I have less bonds and things like that. I think other things that have contributed to it, if we look at society, is just marriages are happening later and later in life. And so I think one of the difficult transitions for a lot of people with adult friendship is if they do get married, especially if you are later in life. I got married pretty young, I would say, on average. And so a lot of my wife and I's friendships became like corporate friendships, right? And so like they were our friends, you know, as we're building life and relationships at this time. But the older you get, like the more you're like, he's got friends, I've got friends. I don't like his friends. I don't like her friends. And then there's like these ambiguous, weird kind of breakups and things like that happen. I think, you know, more and more people are moving across the country for jobs. More and more women are taking, you know, corporate jobs. And so just some of those spaces that you would have time and ways to develop, I think it's just a culmination of a lot of those things. And then as we look back, we're like, oh, yeah, I am more, my parents seem to have more travel buddies or, you know, some of those things. And for us, maybe in our culture or our age range, it feels a little more distance. I don't know. Those are just some of the things I was thinking about, like, what are those contributors? Because we didn't just get here overnight, right?
Yeah. And I think also making friends as adults is hard. And we don't just say it's awkward. It's uncomfortable.
It's not like you go up to someone and say, can I be your friend?
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, I like them and they like me. And there's like this connection and it feels like you have to define this relationship. And so we're just taking that factor out, unless you're doing something where it's like an activity where I do think the participation can lead to deeper friendship. It's just awkward. It's really hard. And we're already going through transitions as adults where it's like we're building our careers, we're having kids, we're getting married, or there's changes. People are starting to die around us. Like we're dealing with more serious issues compacted by, I think it's a great point that you brought up, the pandemic, because our connection was pushed to, in a lot of ways, technology. And then now when it's pushed back to, okay, like everything's open again and there's community, well, you're getting results where like Harvard Graduate School of Education is saying 3 in 5 Americans report feeling lonely. And we kind of wonder why, but it's like, it's already difficult. It's already hard adulting. And then trying to find this childlike definition of what a friend is doesn't feel natural in this world that wants us to be like corporate, like bosses and all of these things. And so,
and I think
really
if you're somebody that's feeling that way, like I'm lonely, I feel isolated. I mean, if you want to be a better boss, you can go find books and resources on how do I become a better leader. If you're like, oh, my marriage is struggling, I can find plenty of books on how do I help build this relationship. If I want to help my parenting struggling, plenty of resources in that. But like friendship is such a core need that we have, but there's not like all these resources on like how to go make friends if your friendships are falling apart, or you said like defining the relationship. And I think that's one of the other awkward parts of adult friendship is like, if you leave a job, there's like a definition. Okay, there's a date that I'm leaving and I'm gone, and okay, those relationships, it makes sense they fall apart. If you're getting divorced, you're like, okay, there's a finality, an end to this relationship. A lot of times with friendships, there's not like a finality of like you drift apart. There's like not like a today we were friends and tomorrow our relationship changes. And so that nebulous, awkward, and I've felt that like a lot of times, and I'm someone that like deeply values friendship. And so when things start to drift, I'm like the guy trying to throw out the life raft and like sending the text again, hey, things okay, like all that. And it's difficult for me because loyalty is a big part of who I am, to like have people ghost me or feel like, oh no, what did I, because that's what I start to assume, and probably a lot of us do. What did I do? And a lot of times it's nothing you did, but like I can drift that way, and then I'm like, I'm a bad friend. I'm the, you know, so I think that's.
And I think you hit on like stages of life earlier, and that is something that you see that like when you're a married couple, when you get married, your friends start to change. When you have kids, your friends
graduate
start to
high
change,
school,
like
college,
all that stuff. It's just like there's these different stages of life, and then along with that, kind of running parallel, you're getting busier and busier and busier. And I think it's like I would say most friendships don't die because of betrayal; they die because of busyness. Like they die because you're not available. You know, and I think that's what loneliness looks like too, which I don't know that people always see those things as synonymous, but a lot of times loneliness is busyness, because it's like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I can't do that. I can't go to this thing. I can't go to, oh, you're having a party or whatever. I'm sorry. I can't. I'm just so busy right now. And I hear that all the time from people. And I'll even say that sometimes. And then you kind of do a self inventory and go, wait, what am I busy? It's more of a feeling, I think, sometimes. I'm not saying we aren't busy. We are busy. But there are hours of the day when it's like, why am I unwilling to fill those hours of the day with like building friendships, and why, because I think we get pretty protective of that. It's like, oh, well, I got my Netflix time, or I've got my whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic that we're trying to navigate right now.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like thinking about loneliness, I think sometimes maybe that feels like isolation, but a lot of times, if you dig deeper into when someone's feeling lonely, what does that actually feel like? It's feeling unseen or misunderstood, or it's feeling like nobody knows me. I feel like I hear that the most. It's like, I don't feel known by the people around me. And that's, for a lot of people, a definition of having a friendship. And then being around people in a room or a group, but feeling disconnected or unseen. Those are probably the top ones, I think, that also lead to this feeling of loneliness when we're surrounded by people, but just feeling not known.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, the church is probably, it can be the best place to find community, but it can also be the most shallow place to find community and convince us that we're doing it right. I think one of the examples is, hey, on a Sunday morning, like a Church Like Christ Community Church, I can be convinced that I'm friends with all these people that I'm shaking hands with, I'm seeing, I catch up with them every week, and I'm under this illusion that we have this deep kind of friendship, but we're not really sharing, or we use phrases like we do life together and things like that, but are we really, and then, you maybe get into a small group, which is what a lot of churches try to say, hey, there's value in getting into a deeper community, because we know with, a few thousand people here, you're not going to build deep, meaningful relationships, especially when everyone's looking forward and hearing a message and worshiping. So then we pull into small groups, and a lot of times it's studying the Bible and things like that. But getting into that, that pool of vulnerability, it takes time. It's kind of like getting into the baby pool that kind of slopes down. It's scary. But a lot of times, right? Well, I'm a part of a small group. I'm a part of this, and we pray together. We do these things together. But that person that takes that first step of vulnerability is often a really scary, difficult, vulnerable place. But we're convinced that because we're showing up, that equals deep, meaningful friendship that we were created.
Well, and I think that's, go ahead, Jess.
No, I was just going to say, and I would argue, though, that showing up matters.
Yeah.
Like the repetition, like that is how you create more connection. I would suggest walking in the same door every week, sitting in the same spot and saying hi to the people around you. And that repetition does matter, but it doesn't necessarily always lead to that deep connection. But that is how we begin to do that, is showing up, doing things repetitively strengthens what we're going through.
Well, and maybe it is things like social media that have kind of conditioned us to think that access is equal to intimacy, and I don't think that is. And so, like, even coming into church every week, that's a good habit. But if you're just like, oh, I'm surrounded by people, yet I'm starving for connection, I'm starving for people, in a weird way. It's like I have all this access, but yet I'm not taking the next step to actually it's the hard work of building those relationships.
And maybe that crux right there that you're talking about is where and why we feel loneliness the most, is that we're in a place where we notice that nobody knows who I am, or I'm not feeling connected. And so maybe that's why we sometimes get that idea that, okay, I go to a big church and nobody knows who I am, because we're noticing that even more.
Well, even what we're doing here, a podcast, I think that's one of the things that I think about. Like, I'm not going to endorse the podcast I've listened to since like 2008, but it is a podcast I've listened to for a very long time. And I've gone through all the stages of life listening to these guys on this podcast, and it's like this parasocial relationship that starts to develop. I think that's taught people to be like, oh, okay, well, I feel like I kind of got this idea of friendship, right? Like, but it's much more voyeuristic. You're not actually you're not actually exchanging anything. You're not able to be vulnerable. And I think social media is the same way. A lot of times it's like there's visibility, but there's not vulnerability. And how do you get to that? And I don't know. I mean, sure, maybe a Zoom call or a Marco Polo or FaceTime or some of those tools, we could use them to get more vulnerable. But I think you can't have that friendship without the vulnerability.
Yeah. And I think one of the simplest ways to start to take maybe that step in whatever relationship, I think that'll help you take that next step into more vulnerability and more intimacy or whatever you need for a deep friendship is like, I need help. And it doesn't have to be something big, but I think just like admitting that you need help and then inviting people to help you, I think is one of the greatest ways for a friendship to start to happen. And so maybe you're like, hey, there's this person I really like, or a coworker, or someone in my small group, and they're piquing my curiosity. I think we could be really good friends. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I want to move to that next step. I think something simple like I need help. And it doesn't have to be like, come fix my house. Maybe you find out they have a skill and say, I need help, but maybe it's, I need help learning this on my phone, and then setting up that time. Cause I think saying you need help opens up the door for vulnerability. Now opening up the door for vulnerability also opens up the door for pain and rejection. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the other, if you have a fear of pain and rejection, then it's going to push you away from that desire to be vulnerable, the desire to say, I need help. But oftentimes, if you're the first one that opens that door to say, I need help, then that person's going to be more and more willing to, one, love to help you, but also in their own way say, I need help. And then we start to walk deeper into, I think, vulnerability and deeper, meaningful, impactful friendships.
Mm-hmm. I will say in this area, like probably one of the things that where I notice like my own loneliness a lot is being socially very busy and having a tight schedule where I'm seeing a lot of people, but then feeling lonely. And I just want to share something that I do, because I feel like a lot of times that can affect our identity, and to be very inward of like, okay, yeah, nobody noticed me. Nobody asked how I was today. Like, man, I saw 50 people and nobody talked to me. If I notice my feeling of loneliness, like this is just what I do that helps me. I notice that feeling and I say what does that feeling want me? What is it telling me about myself? Usually if I notice I'm feeling lonely, it's because the people that are in my life, my friends, I haven't reached out to them and I'm not experiencing connection. So I'm noticing it more in social relationships, in those maybe less deep relationships that you talked about earlier, Alex. And so that for me, I think is a place that I struggle, that you can a lot of times get really stuck in making it back to like, well, nobody likes me, or man, does anybody even care about who I am? But if I go deeper, it's okay, there is something that I also need to be doing here that's like, I'm not reaching out for that connection, but it's really difficult.
Well, and I think you're right, because when you want that vulnerability, you want that deep connection, but I think a lot of people are in a position where they're kind of saying to themselves, I don't want to go first. Like I want someone to approach me. Like I come into this church every week, and no one says hi to me. Mm-hmm. And like I'm not saying they're not to blame for some of that. Like they could be more outgoing or whatever, but I do think a lot of people find themselves in that place where it's like, well, do I have value to others? Do people perceive me as someone that they want to be friends with? And so they might come in kind of quietly expecting that to happen. But I think like you're saying, the encouragement is you might be the one that has to take that step to make those connections. Yeah.
When I think another place that the church has failed in friendship is we put so much weight on, marriage or dating relationships. And there's so much around the nuclear family that, one, there's people that feel called not towards that lifestyle, or two, they're just not in that kind of space yet where they're healthy enough. And so we force all of the weight and to be on those types of relationships for our emotional needs to be met. And it feels like friendship kind of gets demoted. I mean, even for me as a spouse, if I'm the one that's carrying all of my wife's emotional needs and load, then that's not how we were designed, just for that one person to carry it. I think it's a shared community. And so I'm grateful that my wife has friends. And that was a big thing, honestly, at the beginning of our marriage, because my wife, I'm from Omaha. And so I had a lot of friends because I didn't go very far. And she moved from a small town and left all of her best friends who grew up with in small town neighborhood. They went to college together, and she comes here for a job. And one of the greatest needs she had was for close proximity and friends to be here, to do things with, to experience life with. And so some of the greatest gifts to our marriage were the friends that she developed and the weight that took off of me. Not that I didn't care for her, but there's just things that you need and you can get from relationship and friendships from same gender or just other people that we weren't meant to put on one person. But oftentimes we kind of celebrate marriage as like, no, that person is your savior. Instead of this one, I mean, scripture talks about over and over, especially Paul in his letters, that we're supposed to care for one another, and all of these ideas of building community and not a reliance on one person is something that oftentimes I think we don't talk about that enough inside of the church.
Sorry, Jess, thought you were going to say something. You looked like you were ready. Sorry.
I just think that's true. I mean, my husband, Ben had the same experience where he's moving to Omaha from Connecticut, and just validating that is so true. And I think that like that's just a good reminder of when we meet people, like keeping that in mind of just like their stories and where they're coming from. And that's that's really difficult. I remember it was not just like the first year that he moved here. It was a couple years and more of just like finding connection and finding that depth. But I think that's a good point there.
Well, they say anything that's worth much is something you have to work for. And I think that friendships are one of those things. And I think people are starting to identify that they are lonely and saying that they want community, but I can't help but think sometimes even for myself, it's like, I want community, but I really love convenience. Like I love the just easy button solution, the magic pill, the silver bullet. And so like you were saying, Alex, like with the church and some of the things we offer, it's not meant to be the silver bullet. It's just meant to kind of help create an infrastructure for those opportunities to happen. But really you as the individual have to do the work to make those relationships happen.
Yeah. And commitment. I think most relationships, if we're honest, or your friendships, even your marriages began based on chemistry, right? Like, oh, we have chemistry together. Oh, we like each other. We're fans of the same thing. It's those shared relationships, but there becomes a point in relationships that last that say, okay, commitment has to run deeper than chemistry, because we're not always going to agree on everything. We're not always going to like each other. We're not always going to want to be friends, right?
Or you're afraid of rejection, right?
Yeah.
It could be, this person might not like me.
Yeah.
And then what am I going to think about myself?
Exactly. And scripture, talks about one of the things that people often quote is iron sharpens iron. As iron sharpens iron, so does a brother or a friend sharpen one another. And part of that is sparks fly when iron sharpening iron. You're going to knock some rough edges off to be sharpened. And we need conflict, because conflict is not always bad. We need conflict in our lives to sharpen us, to move us along, to help us become better friends, better parents, better whatever. And oftentimes, if we're afraid of conflict, or all of our relationships in life are built off chemistry and how I feel and how you make me feel all the time, then they're going to be pretty shallow, and you're going to be pretty disappointed and not have a lot of deep, meaningful friendships. And you're always going to be running away from them, I think.
So what do we think actual friendships are built on? Like, is it just spontaneity? Like, is it just magic? Does it just happen? I mean, because I think of some of my best friends that I still have today, it was time and place. It was it was situational. I mean, I didn't feel like I really sought it out necessarily, but I guess if you're not always kind of open to that potentially happening, I don't know. I think you can find friendship in the unlikely places a lot of times, across generational gaps even, where maybe you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to be a friend with this person who's, 20, 30 years older than me, but that I wouldn't rule that out, right? Like there's just so many variables to what a friendship could be built on.
I think friendship built over time is saying it literally comes down to saying yes to something, and it's not prescriptive. So whatever that is in your life, it's saying yes to an invite. Maybe it's saying yes to trying a new hobby and meeting a new group of people. Maybe it's extending an invitation, but I think it is literally that is the sauce of it's saying yes to something. It's kind of moving into what you're talking about, Alex, like that. It's uncomfortable. It's that friction of something's going to change and I'm going to have an awkward conversation and I'm probably going to think in my head, I can't believe I just said that out loud. Like to this, there is awkwardness in it, and that's so valid. But I really think it does come down to saying yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I think for me, one of the best resources for somebody that's like trying to wrestle through friendship that I've ever read is there's a guy named Dr. Wesley Hill, and he wrote a book called Spiritual Friendship, and he's homosexual but not practicing, but he would still label himself gay, and he was at Wheaton and has worked at some other universities and teaching this, but he wrote this entire book on spiritual friendship and essentially how friendship was a deep spiritual thing inside of Scripture, and people made oaths and bonds and things like that to one another were not the same as marriage, but they were saying we are committed to deep, lasting friendship throughout all of history, throughout church history, that oftentimes we don't value in the same way. And he talks about the reality of people that do live more isolated lives. Like for, the three of us, we go fill out a form that says, who's your emergency contact? Easy, right? You're a 42-year-old that's moved out of your parents' house and you're filling out that same form, and maybe you're somebody that's practicing celibacy or you're just not married. Like those things become more difficult. I want to take a trip around the world. I want to experience things in life. Who's my travel partner? For us, like that's an easy, where do I go for Easter this weekend? Like how do I spend that? Who do I talk to about choices in life when I move and things like that? And so there's a huge segment of people in our world and in our churches that, because friendships have been not focused as deeply spiritually as they should be, or intimacy, we just use intimacy for sex, and that kind of stuff. But because we don't preach about how deeply intertwined and our need for connection is, or we get weird, we're like, oh, what's going on with you two? You're too close. And we do the guy-girl labels, guy-guy, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times that there's just people that have this deep longing that is a God-given need, and marriage isn't the place right now that they can get it fulfilled through. Yeah. And it's like, who's going to step up? Who's showing up when they're in the hospital room because they don't have a spouse, or they just need somebody to show up and be with them and sit with them? Like for all of us, it's a pretty easy button answer, right? Yeah. But there's so many people in the church and in our world that are longing for that are designed, built in that desire by God, but oftentimes we're not creating spaces where we're allowing that to happen.
When I wonder if people too sometimes look at it almost like love, like movies, they kind of romanticize this connection and, I found the love of my life, and it's so profound. But I think deep friendships are usually formed and forged in the most boring circumstances ever. Like it's it could be waiting at the DMV or jury duty or something like that. But I mean, you find people in places where you are maybe bored, or you're doing a project, or you're doing something that isn't that glamorous, but there's some things in common there that you can look for. Like you're showing up, you're consistent, you're going, like we said, you're going to church every week, you're doing these things consistently to where you have that opportunity for those relationships to form. And then you look at things like even our phones, where we can't handle any boredom or awkward silence or anything like that. We're immediately looking at our phones, and what that does societally as you kind of just put up a wall. We could be sitting, all three of us could be sitting here and having this conversation, or we could just pull up our phones and just ignore each other. And I think I see that so many times, especially when people don't know each other that well. They're just like, okay, this is awkward, I'm gonna look at my phone. Where before that was an option, that boring, awkward situation was someplace where a friendship could have bloomed.
We started with how's the weather out there,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like we joke about those things,
Yeah.
but those are really, they're big ways that relationships I think are forged. And on the inverse, I do think that technology in some ways can, help us actually build more intimacy and stay connected. So if you're staying connected throughout the week, like I think, and I've probably said this before, like when I was a kid, my dad would leave for work in the morning, kiss my mom goodbye, and then see her when she got home, right? And there wasn't like checking in throughout the day or, those things like, oh, remind me to share this story when I get home, or, some of those fun things that I'm able to, share with my wife or have conversations or just check in throughout the day. So that when I get home, I don't just have to dump my entire day on her or, she knows what's happening. We've been dialoguing throughout the week. And I think the same can be said with, group chats or small groups or invitation to pray for things or setting reminders on your phone. Or that's one of the reasons I'm passionate about the app that we have is, man, I've been able to, a lot of times in a church world, we mistake friendliness for being a friend.
Yeah.
And it's good to be friendly. That's where it starts. But in the atrium, there's times where people just have a lot going on in their life. And in those pass by kind of moments, they don't always want to share. But so you're like, hey, how's it going? Good. But I've like seen people's prayer requests in the app. And now all of a sudden I have a window into what's actually happening in your life. And so when I see you, I'm like, oh man, I saw, whatever is going on in your life. I saw you're coaching 3 Upward teams on Tuesdays and that's so fun. How's it going? Or whatever prayer request people put in there or being able to send a direct message and a direct prayer to somebody. And so I think a few of those tools, that's, if we use them well as a church and as a community, really can enhance our ability to care for, love, pray for, consider one another.
I don't think there's any technology that's just net evil, right? It's just, it's like how we use it, how we interact with it, how we being aware of when we're using it as a wall or a barrier. I think that's the thing for me is like, I would never want to give up technology in general, whether it's social media or my phone or the things I use every day. But it's like learning to go past the point of just being like, oh, this is also magic and wonderful and new, and the novelty of it, to a place where it's like, okay, yes, how am I using it practically? How does it benefit me? And then am I taking time to identify those places in my life where it is not helping me? And be okay to live with that, paradox of, hey, can be good and bad. I just need to acknowledge that and be aware of it, where sometimes I think we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and people either want to say it's all evil, it's all bad, or it's all good, or it's all good, in an effort to kind of have a position, right? Like if I say anything bad about technology, then people are going to think I'm anti it. And if I see too much good, they're, you know what I mean? It's just, I think you just have to take it in balance, in a balanced view.
Well, kind of to your point, like we do soothe a lot of times with technology. And so even this year I've noticed, like, so my son's a 7th grader, and which means last year he was a 6th grader. So he's in middle school, and Millard last year, it's math. And I think actually all of Nebraska said that kids couldn't have their phones anymore in school.
Oh, wow.
And so even the different, like Britain didn't have a phone last year, but the difference in like the connections Britain's made this year, because a lot of the other kids did. And so what would happen, he would get to school or lunchtime and nobody would talk to each other. He'd always be, all they do is play their games. They're doing all this kind of stuff. And like, he's come home this year talking about a lot more conversations at lunch. We're learning a lot more about his friends, about these people that, because of that, like
because he has a phone now, you're saying,
well,
or
no,
because he doesn't?
Because no one's allowed to use them in school.
Oh,
so
because everyone's off the,
everyone's off of it at lunch. You can't use it in the building. So you get there early and you don't just stare at your phone or watch YouTube. Like you have to talk about how's the weather, or you're talking about track, and like, so for me as a parent, it's just been fun to see. And we have to teach that, it's one of the new things that is happening.
It's not just kids.
Yeah, it's not just
I was gonna say, what a good model.
It's definitely not just kids, but I've been able to just see
cell phone boxes at the church front doors.
Front door every week. Yep. So, and you gotta pay a little indulgence to get it back. Just kidding. That's a bad joke.
But I think when we answer the question, like, how do we move from like that acquaintance into deep relationship? For me, it's consistent, small interactions. It's that repetition over time. And then I think we need to get away from the lie that friendship means we have a group of 10 people
Yeah.
Depth is quantity, and even having one or two friendships that are deeper is so meaningful. And I think a lot of times we can tend to discredit that when we're comparing to somebody else. And so I think that a lot can get lost in that. And then I think moving is just having shared experiences where you're showing up for the same things, noon ball or, playing games or
a Lord of the Rings watch party.
Absolutely, yes.
And not that you do anything nerdy like that, Jess.
I think it is. I think it's like also one of the biggest ways I've built friendships is to not take myself so seriously. It's to let myself like continue to play. We used to play as kids. And so it's like, what does playing and having fun
really good,
as an adult look like? And I was just talking to Ben about this the other day. Like, I feel like some of my deepest connections when I found other adults that nerd out over things that I nerd out over. And it's not just like, I'm not just like, I don't just talk to my friends about like therapy stuff or, like mom stuff. It's like, what makes me an individual that I love? I mean, I could talk to you probably for an hour about how I read Project Hail Mary and went and saw it this weekend. Like, it's doing those things that are just that you like to do and finding people that enjoy that. But I think it's also like not taking ourselves so seriously.
Yeah, that's another podcast where you and I can review that movie because it's also probably my favorite movie I've seen in so long.
Perfect.
It's so good.
Alex?
My wife can be friends with you.
Okay,
She's
good.
She read the book and is excited to go watch the movie. I'll probably watch the movie, but not read the book.
Yeah. The last.
I didn't read the book.
Okay.
Anyway. Sorry, we got on a tangent.
But
things like that.
But that is the connection right there.
Right?
That's
exactly.
it. That's an example of it happening right there.
But I also think another huge one is building emotional safety. So when someone says, "Hey, Alex, how are you?" Good. Okay, good. Have a great day.
That's so, even I notice even with my kids when I ask that though, they're teenagers and it's tough sometimes.
Yeah, I
like
think
they're like, am I in trouble? What's going on? Why are you talking to me that way? Why are you being weird, Dad?
Sometimes
Why,
I'm like, we need to think of more like
I just want to
greeting.
check in on you.
Yeah.
Like I care, but it's like they don't. If you don't have those rhythms, which I don't think our family is not good at, just like having a rhythm or a repetition or a schedule of checking in that way. It's just more of like, oh, we're noticing something's going on. Like, how are you? What's happening? And if you don't have those rhythms in place, people can be caught off guard by it, or it's personality based or whatever. I get uncomfortable when people ask me that because I'm such a like feeler person where I'm just like discerning what's going on. When someone asks me that, I'm assuming that they're doing that. They must be like picking up on something and they're asking me questions and then I get defensive. It's just, it's stupid, but I think that's the messiness of people and getting involved and trying to form relationships.
And I think that's where you get to interpret it yourself of what's your definition of being real and not just saying, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's not prescriptive, where it's like, what is it that makes, how are you going to respond versus how I would?
Yeah, this all gave me a business idea. Kind of like, I mean, there's plenty of
all
swipe
the
left,
apps
swipe right, right?
There is.
But for friendship, right? So compatibility, you can just put your friendship compatibility.
I already have the name for it.
those
We're going to call it
things.
Friender.
Friender. But we're going to do it better than the others.
All right, as we wrap this up, what's one thing, we could say to someone or encourage people this week that they could, one thing they could do this week? I mean, it's Good Friday, Easter weekend. I mean, what's a step they could take, to start building more meaningful relationships?
I think I said it earlier. I just say, I need help. Can you help me with something? And I think that will be one of those simple things that will open up that door for vulnerability. And I think most people would love to be asked, and they're waiting for that. I think most people are just waiting for somebody to take that first, make that first assertion, and they need it. Especially if you're hanging out together and they're still showing up consistently, there's something that's intriguing about it. So be curious and ask those questions. Say, I need help, or overhear something. I think like the movie conversation the other day in my hallway, I just overheard someone talking about Survivor, and I was like, oh, they were talking about it loud in public. So therefore, it wasn't a closed door meeting. So I inserted myself into the conversation, and all of a sudden we just had a fun, laugh filled, kind of conversation around it. And we're like, we both did watch, and I see this person all the time. They're in the hallway of my work, and neither of us knew that both of us enjoy a common experience. So it led to just fun. So be curious and take the risk to, especially if it's, don't eavesdrop on conversations or hack people's phones.
Yeah.
But if they're talking about it in public,
Yeah. That's good though. Good advice. Don't hack people's phones, please.
That's what we're taking away. I would say just what are you not saying yes to that you could?
Yeah, that's good.
And then I think there is so much value in maybe if that feels really difficult right now to make eye contact, keep your eyes up when you're walking down a hall and acknowledge somebody. And that might not feel like connection, but that is foundational.
Yeah.
That is whether you are speaking or building into that relationship, you are reminding yourself that people matter and that acknowledgement matters and you're treating people how you want to be treated. And I think that kind of stuff, those little passive moments are building blocks to what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's great.
How about you?
All right. Well, I think you guys covered it all. I don't
Okay.
know if I have any more. I mean, I'm what would I don't know. I consider myself an ambivert or whatever you want to call it. I think they called it an
Same,
outrovert or whatever, where I need my recharge time alone, but I also get filled with like community and stuff like that. And so it's tricky. I think for me, it's hard for me to be prescriptive with it because all my relationships have been more organic, I guess. And so it's tough for me to say because I'm not probably the best example of friendship or making friends, but the friendships I do have, I cherish them, but I would just say I think you hit the nail on the head. Just, you don't know where that's going to come from. So make yourself open to it. And like anything, you could get hurt, but just be willing to invest that time, I think is important. And if you're looking for friends, it's probably not the best thing to go to our social media to, you could become friends with us there, I guess, parasocially. But if you have any questions or concerns or maybe some good tips for friendship, you can reach out to us on social media, on TikTok or Instagram at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org or leave us a voicemail at 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then. We'll talk